Welcome to Function First Care podcast, Stu. So nice to have you here. So
Fantastic. It's great to
yeah.
be here as well.
So Stu, we actually met a couple of years ago at the Vocational Rehab Association conference, and it was their 30th year anniversary milestone, I believe. And I was taken aback by your humility um, when you won the Vocational Rehab Practitioner of the Year award. You weren't expecting it at all, and you just had such a graceful way of receiving the award, and I just instantly got drawn to your energy. So yeah, we've become good friends ever since, and we've been keeping in contact. And yeah, I can't believe it's been a couple of years ago. Time flies. So yeah, so I'm so happy to have you here, for people to hear about your journey and to know, the person behind the profession as well. So, yeah, could you start by introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your journey from the army to the prison service to charity work and now running your own company, SDM Training Services?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invite as well. It's 2 years since we first met. We've spoke a lot over that time, and kind of become energized every time we speak, which is always great. But yeah, I'm Stu. I left school at 16. I joined the army as an apprentice. As a joiner, I'm a joiner and a military engineer by trade, which is a bit bizarre because it's like not just joinery, but also kind of things like bridge building and demolitions and mine warfare and boat operating, water purifications, and it's kind of a world away from what I do now. But for some people who I speak to, it really resonates because it's very practical, and they can understand that. Um, Spent 6 years in the army, left there, went worked for a building company for a couple of years. Absolutely loved that job. And my now best friend is someone who I met there, and that's kind of 25 years ago. But knew it wasn't the job for me in the longer term. Joined the prison service, which I'd seen or heard, sorry, advertised over the radio, which I still talk to people about now. When you're thinking about proactive job search and skills, that's where they were advertising. Spent around about 13 years in the prison service, a career that I absolutely loved. By the end of it, I think and we'll touch on this more throughout the session. I left again at just the right time. There went into a job that didn't enjoy, but did it. But it was that freedom that I needed to move on and start and do other things. And then worked for RBLI, delivering the LifeWorks course, which was employability for veterans and for family members of serving personnel, literally all over the world. My second month, sorry, in the job, I was working in Brunei with monkeys climbing over the building. Absolutely brilliant. Went to places like Cyprus and Belgium, less glamorous places as well, but loved that. And it really gave me a buzz for employability, which I took into what I do now, which is running my own business, delivering employability support.
You've had such a varied career path. And looking back, what do you think those different environments taught you about people, potential, and what helps someone move forward?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, first of all, I've met some amazing people throughout that time, worked with them, learned a lot from them, but also um, different personalities and understanding within any environment. The job description itself, yes, it's important, but it's the personalities and how they do them jobs that are really important, because you can't have, in looking going forward, to the kind of world that it looks like they're almost trying to create at times, you can't have robots doing jobs where everyone's doing the same thing. You might have the same job description, but everyone's bringing different things to the table. And that's really important, because you may have the same job title, the same job description, the same salary, but people will be doing that job differently. And providing it is in a positive way and it's collaboratively and it's focused on moving forward, that is brilliant. because that's what makes teams stronger, regardless as to what environment it's in.
Absolutely. And you mentioned you left school early to join the army through an apprenticeship route. What made that path feel right for you at the time?
Probably about a year and a half before leaving school, I went on work experience with my dad. Um, Again, we'll touch on this a little bit. My mum and dad are amazing people, not just because they're my mum and dad, but because of the support that they gave me. And I can never talk highly enough about them. But my dad went out and got me work experience where he worked for the council, doing outside gardens. Um, and although it wasn't something at the time I naturally wanted to do, I think he understood that getting in a work environment, being outdoors, how good that would be. And although I wasn't working in the same team as him, I was working within that same organization and absolutely loved it. I did 2 weeks there, two completely different weeks with a different role. And I'd started to realize that I was probably going to be ready for the world of work at 16 rather than staying on into education. I was a very practical person and I enjoyed being around adults, and having adult conversations and kind of being given responsibilities and given jobs to go on with. And I thrived in that environment, really enjoyed it, learnt a lot from it, and actually then started to almost consider that as a bit of a career as well, amongst kind of my ideas that I wanted to become a joiner.
And well, I mean, sitting in a classroom until 18 was never going to be the right fit for you. How important do you think it is that young people understand there are different routes to success?
Yeah, I speak about this quite a lot actually. I knew at 16 years old that I needed to be out of the classroom. I'm a very practical person. I'm quite energetic. I did all right at school. Don't get me wrong. I was doing well. The education system thankfully worked for me quite well as well. But I knew it was time to move on and get out into that big wide world. And I was very fortunate in the fact that I was offered apprenticeships. I was offered one backup home in Hartlepool, and also one with the army. But beyond that, what I would have done, I'm not quite sure, because I was ready for getting out away from the classroom into work. And it's quite difficult now for young people. Apprenticeships are still there. In fact, there's never been so many apprenticeships. There are loads of different types for jobs ranging from, I've come across, working as a pilot, trained to be a pilot. And I've also come across tattoo artists and dog grooming and things like that. And it's amazing because most careers now you can do as an apprenticeship. But they're still very much in demand. But for those who can't secure apprenticeships, it's quite difficult because we've now got this post-16 education where people have got to stay in some kind of education up until the age of 18. And I don't think that always suits people. It's sitting in a classroom, learning a different subject, and it's going to get you ready for work when it comes to it. And a lot of the course, I'm not always sure they always do. And I've had this conversation with quite a few people over the years. So my advice with that is apprenticeships are there. There are other routes as well, but making sure that you do pick a course if you are more of a practical person that is going to involve a lot of practical stuff. I do work with an organization called Sports Connect, and I think that works really well for them because they take kind of quite sporting and active people. They give them that classroom based stuff, but also there's a lot of physical stuff they're doing. They're playing football, but they're analysing their own performances. They're getting out of the classroom and doing things physically as well. And I think that strikes a good balance there, really does. So have a look at what is that course going to involve and find something that you are going to enjoy as well, because the education is really important, but the enjoyment is also really important.
I love that. And it just shows I mean, being in a classroom is not everybody's kind of preferred learning style as well. Like you said, some people prefer learning being more practical and hands-on. So actually, it's really nice to be able to sort of encourage people that's, there's so many different routes to employment and, if people don't necessarily go to university, that's absolutely fine because they can find loads of different alternative employment routes, and ways to actually get employment that doesn't involve going to university. So, yeah, what did the army give you, not just in terms of practical skills, but in terms of mindset, identity, and function?
Yeah, that ability to keep smiling no matter what's going on, which I think I've always done pretty well anyway. But you definitely learn that resilience. Again, I came across some amazing people who I was proud to call friends, and I still am now. Um, but no matter what you've got going on, no matter where you are in the world and how bad things are, to just smile and have a laugh and keep going. And it's something I've used a lot throughout my life, sometimes to my own detriment, again, which we will touch upon at some
Mm.
point. But to be able to, no matter what the situation, to be able to just sit back and smile. I remember being in Canada, watching the Northern Lights. It was, and people pay good money to watch this, and our vehicle had broke down. It was a track vehicle, an armored personnel carrier. I was my section signaller, and we had my section commander, who was a top bloke, Eddie, and our driver, Adi. And the vehicle had broken down, and the rest of our section got put into another vehicle to go and disappear and go and play war games. And we were literally stuck in the middle of the prairie in Canada, waiting to come and have the vehicle recovered. The prairie is just a vastness of nothing, with clear sight of the northern lights, and we were laid on top of the vehicle with a sleeping bag over us, keeping us warm, and a hot drink. And Eddie said to me, lads, remember this: people pay a fortune to come here and do this. Yeah, it's not good. We're stuck in the middle of nowhere. We don't know when we're going to get recovered. But
Wow.
just sit back and take it in, just enjoy it. And I've learned to do that a lot throughout my life, as a
Yeah.
result, no matter what things are going on, just, that ability to stay smiling, think positive, and work away through it. So yeah, the army taught me that.
I love that. I love that mindset, and I think this can really support people with their mindsets, and if they've got mental health challenges, to in terms of the mind frame, like you've talked about. It sounds as if you're a really resilient, positive, full cup kind of type of uh, type of person, and I definitely, that's what drew me to you. Your smile, your energy, your enthusiasm, you're very approachable and personable, and yeah, I think, yeah, you're definitely, I was definitely drawn to that. So you've spoken about choosing to leave the army while you were still enjoying it. What does that say about how you make decisions, and know when something is right or no longer right?
Yeah, again, I'm going to go back to my mum and dad with this. When I was coming to that crucial 2 years, last 2 years at school, my dad was the person who got me the work experience. My dad was the one who came to the careers fair with me, where I eventually, it was during that I spoke to the army, and they told me about joinery apprenticeships within the army, and that was an amazing support. Again, I, I look back on that and just think having him there to do that was amazing. But when it comes to that decision making, the credit I would say goes with my mum for that side of it, because my brother was already in the army. He's 9 years older than me, 8 years, 9 years older, 8 years, I think it is. Um, and there was a lot of conflicts going on at the time, and they'd lived that, him as a young man being sent away to all these places, and then had sleepless nights, and I know that, and there'd been tears in the house. And then all of a sudden, my dad bringing me home from a careers fair and standing in front of my mum and saying, "Mum, I'm joining the army as an apprentice joiner." I can't even imagine what was going through her head at that moment in
Yeah.
time. I don't think she would have spoken to my dad for months after that, but she didn't interfere. She gave me the freedom to make my own choices, my own decisions. She signposted me towards people within the family who would be good to have a chat with to get some impartial advice. Again, went completely against what they told me to do, by the way, or advised me to do. But she allowed me the freedom to make my own decision. And I
Mm,
think that, that was crucial. And I think now about decision making in young people. Give them the trust, give them the support, give them all the guidance, but have the trust in them to make their own decisions. Now, her doing that then was impactful on me because naturally it was what allowed me to go on and join the army. And she was with me when I went to sign on the papers and all that kind of stuff and take the oath. She was alongside me. But when I go throughout my career following that, I did make big decisions. When I was leaving the army, I had a career there that I could have stayed in until I was in my early 40s, more than likely, and I would have got to see the world. But I wasn't afraid to make a difficult decision to leave. When I'd been a prison officer for a lot of years, and again, I could have stayed. I was secure. I was seen as, doing well within that job. There was potential there. I wasn't afraid to make that decision, and that all comes back from that ground that I was given by my parents, my dad, in terms of go away, talk to people, get that information, try things, and my mum giving me the freedom and the confidence to make my own decisions, even if it's the wrong decision at times, but to be able
Yeah.
to do it.
I was thinking, well, firstly, how great that your parents were so supportive, especially having had the lived experience with your brother. But also, I was reflecting when you were talking around the autonomy and choice and independence, like, as a young person to be able to make choices autonomously, and to be able to be supported to do so. And even if you make mistakes, I really believe that in life generally, it's really important to embrace mistakes and failures because that's all part of the learning, So even
Yeah,
if you are making those autonomous decisions and that, your loved ones perhaps are not so supportive of that, you will go through your own mistakes and failures, and it's okay. It's part of the learning to be able to embrace that and think, okay, well, that's happened. I was told not to do that, but actually I learned that myself by making my autonomous decision,
yeah,
and this is what I learned, this is what I could have done differently. Then you just reflect on that experience. But I really believe that if you don't try, you'll never know, right? So yeah, no, it's good that you sort of went with your gut decision and you made that autonomous decision, and it doesn't sound like you regretted it. So yeah. Um and after that you moved into the prison service and later case management work. Like, what drew you into that world?
I was working for a building company. The lads who I was working with there, like I say, went on to become very close friends, including my best friend now. But I was working on a job one time, and the prison service started advertising on the radio, and one of them, well, two of them said that would suit you. And I was thinking, are they trying to get rid of me here? But they were saying, look, they loved working with me, and I loved working with them. But it just, I needed kind of probably a bit more regimented, a bit more discipline back in my life, a bit more of kind of the uniform services. It was probably too far removed from what I'd been used to with the army at times. And they knew that, probably better than what I did, to be honest. And they said that would be a really good opportunity for you. And I applied, not thinking for one moment I would get through the process. And I kept kind of doing so and kept kind of going that little bit further. And then went through training, loved the training, did well at that. I got best student at the end of the training and started to realize, actually, you know what, this it started for probably the first time in my life, started to get a bit of belief in myself, in that sense. Um, and then went into that job and initially working with adult females, which I'd only ever worked in male-dominated environments, so it was a kind of a big shock to my system. Really enjoyed it. I did a few years and then ruptured my Achilles tendon on a sports course. And when I came back to work, I was on light duties initially, and then they announced it was going to re-roll my prison to male juveniles. Um, which was kind of quite a big thing, And a part of that, I ended up, while I was a prison officer, getting the job within the casework team, as a case manager, overseeing, by the end of it, young people on remand, managing quite a big caseload alongside my job. And I learned so many skills there about not just the role of prison officer, but understanding the responsibilities in terms of safeguarding and, working with people outside of the service and that kind of probably in a more collaborative approach than just simply working as a prison officer.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And so you've worked with women offenders, male offenders, and people with very complex needs. What did those experiences teach you about behavior, trauma, identity, and the importance of connection?
Yeah, that everyone's got their own different story behind it for being there, and not just assuming um, that someone is there for that specific reason. Everyone's got their own unique background, their own unique journey to get there, and they've also got their own unique way to help them move forward. You're looking for that hook all the time, that little spark there that they might be interested in that will help them. Um, and it comes with something different for everyone. And spending time to get to know people and talk with people and get an understanding as to what that is. And sometimes it can come from conversations that are struck up very informally, over a game of something like table football or table tennis within an
Mm.
association room, or just by sitting and having a bit of a chat with someone, but to try and find what that hook is with them. And then you can use that to start and look at, okay, what do you aspire to do? What do you want to do? And how are you going to do that?
Mm. When we've caught up previously, you mentioned a really striking story about how you've built rapport with one of the inmates, and like I'd love for you to share that, just because, yeah, absolutely loved how you were so you use your perseverance and your positive sort of approach, and yeah, would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, and it was real hard work. It really was because it challenged me a lot. This young man had come into prison. He'd been transferred from another prison, a younger establishment, and I don't know what he'd been taught, but he came in with very much an aggressive attitude towards staff and towards other young people within the prison, thinking that that was going to be almost his first line of defence. And he got it completely wrong because, every other lad in the prison was wanting to get him. He'd been rude, abusive, racist, everything you could mention towards all of them. And if he'd have been put in with the general population, I dread to think what would have happened to him. But he'd also done that with staff as well. He'd put staff's backs up such a way that people just didn't want to do things for him because it was very difficult to kind of connect with. And I don't know what it was inside me, but just something said, just keep working, just try and build up that connection, no matter what he's doing, no matter what he's throwing at you, just keep trying to stay at that level, trying to get the engagement. And it took a long time. It really did. Before eventually he would then start to kind of say, please, thank you, little things like that. And which was big progress for him. And it was getting to the stage where he would connect with me. He would, if I was on duty, he would specifically wait for me to be there to have a chat about something or to ask for something. We would have a deck of cards, go around the back, sit and have a conversation, because what I wanted to do is we've got to change his thinking and behaviour. We've got to start getting him to understand the damage what he was doing to himself and to others. But you can't do that by just punishing someone and shouting at them. We've got to, I've got to sit down and try and get an understanding as to why he's doing this. Um, Only by doing that can I start to get an understanding as to what we can do differently going forward. And I think for me, the key thing, he was still having bad episodes, real bad episodes, but they were less frequent. And he was engaging with quite a lot of members of staff by this point and making a couple of friends on the unit, which was huge progress. But the key thing was I was going along to all of his case meetings and his parents were coming in. I was getting to understand, see his behaviour being a lot like that at home as well. I'd really struggled. Um, and I was having regular phone calls with his mum, just around his progress. But it was also to understand that was really reassuring for her because he was only 16-year-old or something like that, that she knew how bad he could be. But knowing that he had at least one person within that whole establishment that he could talk to if he had a problem or if he needed some help was so reassuring to her. And it made me realize that actually, that time, the perseverance, the hard work is so, so important.
Mm. And what did that experience teach you about patience and human connection?
there's times when you question yourself. There's times when there was certainly times when I was thinking, oh, the easier option would be just to do what everyone else is doing. But the easy option isn't always the best option. You know, that you've sometimes got to challenge yourself, your own beliefs. You've got to, no matter what's happening, things there. And I still had to challenge him, even during that time of building up the report. I started challenging him on his behaviour, but it was the manner in which that was done. Um, and I had to adapt to that. You know, I had to be able to challenge someone in an assertive way that was still going to maintain that rapport and that relationship. So I was having to use skills that I perhaps hadn't had to use in the past. And I've had to use them now in business. There's people I've come across within my work now that they might not be my kind of people. I might not naturally connect with them all that well. But I've had to, you know, persevere, smile, still keep going on. And it's a skill that I've really had to transfer into my working life now. And that is credit to him because that pushed me, it challenged me.
I love that. And it just shows that, a pack of cards was your biggest tool then. Simple things like that make it possible in relationships, with people who are, guarded or angry. Um, and, it can be as simple as that, can't it? So you clearly have a strong people-focused style. How would you describe what you bring naturally to your work?
I'm a little bit forward thinking and innovative, doing something different, but also doing something simple. You know, that if we take about the pack of cards is a great weapon, you know, because people will the boundaries, the kind of the barriers, the guards will start to drop and people will engage in conversation. That's when you can start doing the work. But I remember sitting around, we had this little back office on the unit I worked in, and having a game of Jenga with a young person around there. You've got to remember the lads who were on this unit were either down there for their behaviour or they were some of the most complex young people in the system. Um, so you had to kind of there was a lot of risk, but you had to take a different approach. And also, not everyone around the rest of the prison would understand what they would see as people almost being rewarded for being down there, and it was never that. And I remember sitting in this back room playing Jenga, as I mentioned, and the governor, our unit governor, came around with some people there from the Youth Justice Board on a visit, and they walked in the room, and I'm sat playing Jenga with this lad, and all they must be going through their head is, you know, what's taking place here, what's happening here, they're sitting around playing games with the lads on the unit, and they asked me what was taking place, and I'd said, oh, Jenga. I said, it teaches us so many lessons in life, about things like decision making, because you're tapping something that might not look like it's going to come out, but you're going to check, see whether it will. But sometimes you've got to stop and go, actually, it's not, and just put it back to where it was. Sometimes you're going to make the wrong decision, and everything's going to come tumbling down, but we rebuild and we start again. You
Mm,
know, it's about having patience, giving someone else their turn, and always kind of looking a couple of moves ahead. And I came out with all this stuff, and I don't even know how I did it because it wasn't scripted. And there was brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant.
I
That is
love
the
that.
kind of attitude we want. And my governor walked out the room and he looked at me. He was like, as if like, how have you just blagged your way out of that?
Yeah.
And they walked off, and the lad who was sat in the room looked at me and went, is is that what we're doing? I went, nah, we're just playing Jenga, just get on with it. It was for their benefit. But it's true, perhaps that was the first time in that person's life that someone has sat down and done these kind of things with them. We learn a lot through playing games and doing things like that. It could be the first time that someone sat and done that with them and spent the time and had conversations and encouraged them, you know. But yeah,
Love
so I
that.
bring a lot of energy, but also, a
Yes.
different attitude like that.
Yeah, and I love how you sort of kind of like used games as a way to sort of connect to empower around supporting around life skills and that's innovative yet very simple, to get that connection and to sort of use it as an analogy and a metaphor around like empowering people with their life skills. And when we've had a chat previously, you've contrasted your sort of strengths and skill set with other people who may be more sort of perhaps methodical or structured. What do you think happens when we recognize that different personalities bring different strengths?
Yeah, we become more respectful of other people, I think, as well, because I think we've all done it. We've worked in environments where other people would see that others aren't working in the same manner that they are, and have a moan about them. Actually, we all bring something different to the table. We all bring our own strengths, also weaknesses as well. We shouldn't forget about that. And that's what makes a strong team. So we shouldn't expect everyone to do the job in exactly the same way that we do it. You know, we do bring something different to the table. Um, I know when we've had conversations about this, and I have this on a regular basis, just about a simple CV. I want the prison I worked in. We had the same job title, we had the same pay scale, um, we had the same job description. We might have another different sub job title underneath that in terms of our role within that specific establishment, but it boiled down to we're all doing the same job, but everyone was doing it differently. And I want someone to be able to walk into an environment with my CV without the name on the top and go, that belongs to Stu, because that's what he does, and I know. And that's really important, because we all, if you had 80 of me, the place would be a chaotic mess. It wouldn't work, because I am high energy at times. I am positive. I am quite excitable. I'm a bit of a joker, in them environments. In fact, people could tell stories about some of the jokes I've played on them, and I would have been a nightmare to work with at times. But that's what I bring, and fresh ideas and innovation. But then someone else needs to calm me down a little bit and go, okay, that's good, but let's just slow everything down. Right. What are the priorities?
Yeah.
What do we need to do first? Have you
Mm,
considered this? Have you considered that?
mm,
Actually, this might not work because of. Whereas me, if you've got 80 of me there, it would go wrong. If you've got 80 people like that, it would go wrong. You need
yeah.
that mix. So it makes you
Ex
more respectful of other people, and what their role is within that team. What do they bring?
Absolutely.
I
And I
think is
think
really
that's why
important.
diversity is so important within teams, because you really can bring the best out of a team when you have different skill sets and different
Yeah,
personalities. And, obviously we met at a conference, and we've previously sort of, spoken about just conferences and networking, being sort of harder for you than standing in front of a room actually of, you know, talking to people. What does that say about the difference between, confidence and comfort? And can you sort of elaborate a bit more about that? So for people who,
yeah,
obviously haven't heard us speak about kind of like, conferences, networking, sort of parties after conferences that are part of those sort of, follow on onto those conferences. Yeah, what's your take on all of it? Because it can be quite tiring, can't it, to
yeah.
be in those environments, and in sensory overload. So yeah, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, I think in my line of work, I established quite a while ago that not everyone is comfortable with places like networking events and conferences and um, careers fairs even, and things like that. And so I thought it's been really powerful for me to share my own experiences over time, specifically across things like LinkedIn, because I'm a very sociable person. As a few people know, I'm quite lively, quite bubbly. I enjoy being around my friends. I enjoy going out with my friends. I go to the football with large groups of people, and they're my natural environments. But when it comes to anything work related, conferences and networking and things like that, I don't. I hate them. I don't like small talk, and I don't like that worry about when do I end the conversation. Do we end it now, or do we just talk for the sake of it? And do we talk about absolute rubbish? Am I going to say the wrong thing? And I do worry about that. Yeah, I enjoy public speaking. In fact, at college, I do some bits at, the lady there who gets me in, Rachel, she always, when I turn up, they can have anything, it could be 500 people in that room. And she'll say, I don't even bother asking if you want a microphone, because you don't need one. I will stand up, I can project my voice, I can walk in amongst the crowd, young people, I can get them talking. And I enjoy that environment, and I respond well to that. But again, a one-on-one and networking event, I don't. So I think for me, I've had to learn how to do it, because it's a big part of my job. I joked recently, I went to an event and I picked up a free plant, and the amount of people that came over to talk to me was amazing. And we just had a short conversation, and I went, and actually it works really well. But also, my wife has started to come along to networking events for me now, because she knows, and she's a very lively bubbly person. She's full of energy herself, but she's not always that sociable. But networking, she absolutely brilliant. She'd go over and just start having conversations with people and kind of ask them what they do. And she pushes me to go outside my comfort zone to do it. And I've done a lot of work with people over the years of just some simple little tips and hints when they're going along to these things with regards to, okay, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to know? And just kind of, if you're coming away from an event with one new contact, you've done well.
Yeah.
So don't put great expectations on yourself. And just, the best way to eat an elephant, small chunks, and go along, start going along, and you would start becoming a bit more comfortable in them environments.
I love, I could really relate to everything you're saying because for people like us who are enthusiastic, we do get ourselves out there in terms of networking. There might be a perception that we sort of are that might be our forte, around kind of networking. And however, in terms of kind of like how we approach that, like I am similar to you that small talk is not my preference, and I thrive more in either a one-to-one situation with just one other person or in a smaller group. And when it comes to bigger sort of group settings, that wouldn't be, yeah, my preference, because it can feel quite overwhelming. But actually, there might be a perception that, like I said, for people who might not know us very well, they might sort of think, oh, do you know that they're absolutely, they love doing this and they're very confident at it. But actually, that might not be the case, for so I think
Yeah.
it's really important to, yeah, not, the saying, don't judge its book by its cover, is very true. Because like I certainly, whether it's professional events or personal events, I very much thrive in kind of like either, like I said, one-to-one or smaller um groups where I can have more deep, meaningful conversations. But, and actually, in networking and conferences, events, I've tried to actually take my own approach. And when I do meet someone, I like to actually delve into that deep, meaningful conversation, really. And I've made really
Yeah.
nice contacts that way. One of them is yourself.
Brilliant.
So actually, if you know your preferred style, it's okay to go along with that, and to think, okay, well, I'm going to sort of be myself in those environments that, I don't sort of prefer, but I'll keep authentic to who I am and take that approach. So yeah. So we've spoken about your journey and what shaped your approach. And what I'd love to talk about now is employability, confidence, and helping people find what fits. So I've had a look at your website, and it talks about helping people face barriers to employment, explore their unique skills, qualities, interests, and aspirations. What do you think people most need when they're trying to find work again?
They need someone to sit down. When we spoke about my positive mindset quite a lot, but someone to sit down with that positive mindset and start looking ahead and start looking forward at what they can achieve, and what is it for that person. That isn't shaped by anything else but what that person themselves want. If I think about transition from places like the armed forces or prisons, or even depending on where you live, quite often we kind of shunted towards specific jobs and careers and things because it just, that's what you should do and that feels natural. And that doesn't work. So it's sitting down with people and understanding, okay, what is it that you would like to do? What is it for you? As an example, and I don't knock this because there's some great stuff going on within prisons, and it's really important that these things happen. But you can go into prison, and if you're on that last bit of your sentence, there's opportunities there to do things like CSCS cards, so you could go and work in construction. Your street work certificate, so that you can go and work for civil engineering companies out on the roads. Rail track qualifications, your PTS, so that you can go and work for Network Rail or subcontractors for that. Absolutely brilliant. But if you fall outside of that, actually, there's not always something there. What if you've got someone who's very creative and dynamic, or enjoys being kind of musical environments, or helping people, supporting people? There's not always that, so they kind of end up being shunted quite often. And it's not just that; it can be within areas of towns or cities. It can also, as I say, transition from the armed forces. So I think from an employability point of view, it's important to sit down with people and go, okay, what is it that you would want to do? Not what you're being
Mm,
told you should do, but what do you want to do? And then really importantly, how are you going to achieve that? What are
mm,
the steps? And that could be, it could be fixed in days by just amending their CV or section for other jobs, or it could take a lot longer. It could be, okay, right, well, you need to gain experience in this, you might need to do this course, you might need to apply for university, but what is it that you want to do, and helping to put that pathway in place. And that, for me, that is really important within employability, and supporting people with any kind of barrier to getting back to work.
mm. And I also think, like, sort of giving that hope to individuals is so important. When they lack confidence or they don't believe in themselves. I think, certainly in my own journey, um, some of the best managers that I've had have really believed in me when I haven't myself, or, they've empowered me, they've given me that autonomy, and the power of actually someone else believing in you when you don't believe in yourself can really do wonders, in terms of you being able to progress where you want to go. So I think the power of hope and instilling confidence and empowering people is just so powerful.
Yeah.
A lot of employability support, can become very formulaic. Um, what do you think is missed when people are only taught how to write a CV or fill in an application form?
Yeah, and that's what we traditionally think of employability as: CV and application forms, or interview preparation, or job search and things like that. And it kind of, it bores me a little bit when I hear that, because employability is so much more than that. And it annoys me a little bit as well, because if we think about a CV, we concentrate on someone having a brilliant CV to be able to apply for jobs. And if you're going to do a little bit better, we're looking at people being able to tailor that CV for specific jobs, and that's seen as progress. But actually, what we want them to do is take that back a little bit further, and we want people to be able to identify what their strengths and skills are, and weaknesses as well, what their qualities are, um, what things they've done throughout their lives, not just their careers, their lives, that demonstrates them skills and qualities, and become more confident in them. That's really important with regards to the CV rather than the CV itself, being able to do it. And if we talk about things like interview preparation, it's great to help people understand and try to predict what questions are going to be asked at interview. And they're going to ask around about 8 to 9 questions or whatever, and about 4 or 5 of them would be these because the job description says so, and that's good. We're helping people with that. But actually, let's take that back a little bit further again, and let's get people so that they're more confident in talking about their skills and qualities with others, and identifying their achievements and things that they're proud of and areas that they're working on. So forgetting about the fact that it's an interview, get them to start doing this. Then when it comes to the interview, they are more used to doing that. They've built up the skill to be able to do that and have more of a natural conversation rather than something that is very much kind of primed for them being there. And for me, that's what employability is more about. It's not about it's not about interview coaching. It's about coaching someone to be talking, identifying about their skills, their qualities, talking about them, and that might come with, it could come with 15 seconds of talking about your favorite subject, then increase that to 30 seconds, then 45, then a minute, then 15 seconds of talking about what communication means. Nothing. 15 seconds doesn't take long, but then building that up, but then getting them to do 15 seconds of talking about themselves, then 30, 45, a minute. But we start and build it up like that. And then, it could be them doing it on their own and then doing it with a friend. But the more people start to do this and build that up, then the more comfortable they're going to be when it comes to that situation. They're in an interview and they're asked, tell me about a time when, or, you know, if you had to deal with this situation, how would you deal with it? Because we've built up that kind of bank there of all the
Mm.
examples, all the things that they're good at. They've already started talking about it more natural.
Mm. And personality really matters when writing a CV, doesn't it? It's writing a CV alone is not enough. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of conversations about this. Anyone who's kind of sat on a session I've delivered or anything like that, or a talk I've given, will know my kind of thoughts on personality into a CV. It's really important. I came across someone once who paid £480 for a CV to be written for them, and it was functional, nothing more. It didn't reflect in any way, shape, or form that person who was stood in front of me with that CV. And one of the big things is saying to people is get that personality in there. You'll find that your strength, what you bring into that role, the key things that you take in that role is in your personality, and put that in there. So I know where I am. I'm, as mentioned earlier, dynamic, I'm energetic, I'm positive, and I will get that into my CV. But if I was someone who was more methodical or process driven or high attention to detail or very accurate, then I would want to get that into there. So much time is spent focusing on the job being applied for, which is really important. It should reflect the job that's applying for, but more important is that it should also reflect the person who it's been written about. And I love it when I get a CV that comes through to me and it's teaming with someone's personality in there. It's using words that and it's not hard working and enthusiastic and all these kind of words that we hear all the time. That's got something different in there, and these ones stand out. They're really important for me. So yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, if you think about the prison, 80 of us doing with the same job title, we all did it differently. Get that personality in there. Get what you brought to the table into that CV.
Mm. Mm. And I guess with people using AI, artificial intelligence now, it's unless AI knows you very well, and you've prompted it for a long time, that it knows your personality very well, that it could incorporate it into the CV. It's really important for individuals to have their own oversight and input, even if they use AI to do their CVs,
Yeah,
uh, because um, you know we know ourselves better than anybody else, right? In terms of kind of what personalities, and if we don't sort of have that self-awareness about ourselves, our close ones, our loved ones do. So, kind of asking around our network of close individuals, our family members or like our close friends, um, what our personalities might be, and then incorporating it into that is really helpful. So I think it's really important to not take things at face value, even if people are using artificial intelligence, but really kind of sort of bring that human oversight, to have a
yeah.
critical overview. Yeah.
I love that. What you just said there about your friends and loved ones. I think that's crucial. And you get far more satisfaction out of that than AI, because AI, let's be honest, is always going to try its best to keep you happy. And it's going to react and reflect what you've put into it.
Yeah.
Whereas, the talking about yourself, for quite a lot of people can be your most difficult subject. It can be challenging until you become that more self-aware and more confident and comfortable in talking about your own skills. So a good place to start is exactly what you just said there. And I actually absolutely love that suggestion. Speak to a friend or a loved one of your best friends, and just say to them, what do I do well? Or I need to be a good communicator for this role. What makes me a good communicator? What is my style like? And you will find that they will give feedback and they will kind of help with that, and they will enjoy doing it because we're more comfortable talking about others than we are ourselves. Just one of them things. But if you
Yeah.
put stuff into AI and a prompt into AI and it comes back with stuff, it's trained to do that. Whereas if you
Mm.
put that prompt into your friend or a loved one and say, tell me a little bit about me, and they will have known you far longer, quite often, than what AI would have done, and better. And when they give that back to you, it's going to feel much, much more impactful, and give you that kind of warm, fuzzy feeling that we like as well, and
Mm.
hopefully help with that self-awareness moving forward.
And speaking about AI, there's a big question at the moment around it, AI and employability. How do you think AI is changing recruitment, applications, and the way people need to stand out?
It's a game changer. It has been for a couple of years, and I think I tried to bury my head in the sand when it first came out, for a short period, and then realised I had to start and understand it. It is a game changer. It's changing a lot, and it's, we can talk about this now, and then by the time this goes live, it would have changed even more because that's the pace of which AI is moving.
Mm,
What we're starting to see is companies are starting to use it more and more within their recruitment processes, and that could be things like writing job descriptions, writing person specifications, targeting the job adverts, for who would ideally be applying for this job. Where do they engage? Do we need to do stuff on Instagram or TikTok, or would it be better in a specific newspaper? So it's helping them with their campaigns. It's helping them to do the sift process with regards to the best candidates. It's also helping them with regards to the interview preparation and the questions and analysing them. Also delivering the interviews as well. We've come across that so far, where it's AI actually delivering the interview. It's a little bit one-sided at the moment because candidates, if they use an AI to put together, and we just spoke about the reasons why, by the way, but if candidates are looking to save time by using AI for their CVs, for their application forms, they're quite often being binned because there's plagiarism checkers that might have a threshold of, say, 20%. No more than 20% of the content is to be AI, otherwise it gets binned. Yet the company themselves have normally used it heavily during that process, but kind of then discriminating against the people who are applying. So it's a bit of an unbalance there. I think in terms of there's some real positive ways in which AI can help in that process for candidates, and I've come across some excellent examples, which have been positive uses. If you are asking it to replace your own behaviours, you're possibly going to fail. If you are using it as a resource, as a tool to support your application, to support with things like interview preparation, if to do things like targeting, you're putting together kind of a personal action plan to achieve a specific job goal or something like that. Things like that are really powerful. They're really impactful. We got to be careful still, but there's great ways in which it can be used, and it's going to keep changing.
yeah, absolutely. We need to embrace it because it's not going anywhere. And I think, and it's good, like you said, that I think, it's really important to embrace it and work alongside it. But like you said, it can't replace the person's own voice, heart, emotions, or personality. Um, how can someone use AI well, do you think, in employability without losing what makes them distinctive?
Yeah, again, we're going back to that personality, making sure you still get that in there. So, if you could, for instance, a positive use would be to put a job description and a person specification into AI along with your own CV or something,
Mm,
and ask it to, what closely links with that job in there, or what suggestions would you have. That is a positive use in itself. But asking AI to amend your CV to that document isn't. And what we're starting to see on platforms like LinkedIn now, where people are having conversations about this, is people are starting to see a lot of very similar content forward to them in terms of things like CVs, job applications, awards submissions, charity bid submissions, things like that, because people are relying so heavily on it. So I would say, whatever you're doing, make sure that you still got that human element is controlling it, because then you will stand out. If you're still getting your personality in there, you will stand out against a lot of samey stuff at the moment. I think a great example I came across about a year ago from someone with AI is he had a job interview for Lidl as an assistant manager, and he put everything into the AI and asked it to conduct a mock interview for him. And it did, based on previous interview questions for that company and everything like that people had reported. And it did and it built up a bit of confidence for him. And he went forward and he got offered the job. And that was a great use of it, rather than getting it to replicate stuff that you can do yourself, or to get it to write content for you and things like that. That was a positive use rather than to replace.
I love that. Yeah, that's really great to hear. And as you know, I'm an occupational therapist and a clinical case manager, rehabilitation case manager. Do you, what's your kind of like sort of experience and sort of tips for uh, individuals who've had an injury, an impairment, and then that's affecting their ability to go back to the job that they had before their injury. In terms of kind of like thinking about how they can transfer their skills onto like to think about another form of employment, what would be your sort of some of your tips and some of your kind of insights from your own
Yeah,
experience?
yeah. I mean, career redirection is daunting for a lot of people. It is from a non-medical perspective. If people have got to go through career redirection, it is anyway. But when you've had a lot going on, it could be life-changing injuries. It's even more so. What I would say is there's a couple of things really. Getting an understanding around aspirations and jobs that people want to do next. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, sitting and having a think. So because someone was a driver, HGV driver, they can't go back to that now, doesn't mean to say that they're going to make a good transport manager.
Mm,
But that tends to be how we've approached things in the past, giving someone a less physical, role within that same sector. It might not always work. So sitting down with people and going, okay, so, and I always think, forget there was any barriers. Forget that whatever's happened. You've got no physical or mental health barriers whatsoever. Is a
mm,
place for us to start. And what do you want to do?
mm,
Um, Never looking at what people don't want to do for me, because they've had enough negative going on for the past few years that I
mm.
don't want to concentrate on that. Everyone else has been telling them what they can't do, what they mustn't do, what they
So
will never
true.
do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy into that. I'm going to leave that in the past, give someone else that job. I want to
Mm,
look at, right, what would you like to do? And typically we look at kind of four different areas here. So, and it's used by other organizations, this, the career ladder. And I always look at a dream. What would be a dream job if there was no barriers whatsoever? Even if it's an astronaut, it gives us an understanding of your personality
mm,
and what you might enjoy. What would be transitional? So what kind of things would be like courses that you could do, or insight days, or work experience, or volunteering that might help you achieve that? What would be an entry level role? So not necessarily a dream, but something that you would see as a good opportunity that would be offer the right support and structure within our organization and opportunities going forward. But also, what would be a survival job? What job would you do, but only if absolutely necessary for the short term? So getting really exploring them with people without any barriers. And then if they can come up with them, and then we go, okay, so these are the things that we're focused on because this is what you're interested in doing. Then we identify what the barriers are.
mm,
So, and then we can start and have a look at how realistic would that be, or what can we do differently that would allow you to do that job, or what other job might you like off the back of that. So that's one key area, of taking them barriers away and then just exploring everything. But the other thing is really them transferable skills, sitting down with someone, not just going through a tick box exercise of, you just because you've done this job, but look at other aspects of someone's life as well. So it may be that HGV driver. We're looking at the skills that they've used as a HGV driver. Also, what qualities have you got?
mm,
So they might be kind of dependable. They might be empathetic. So exploring them, getting them to get a better understanding of that. So yes, I can plan routes, and I've got an understanding of the UK motorway network, but also I've got high attention to detail. I'm
mm,
someone who has great customer service skills as well, but I'm also quite empathetic. I'm also being able to stay calm under pressure. So we're looking at skills and qualities.
mm,
But often look at other aspects of their life as well and get them to understand that work isn't the only place in life that you utilize these skills and qualities and develop them. It could be that they do some sports coaching. It could be that they're a member of a games club. It could be that they're a grandparent, parents or whatever. So getting them to understand other aspects of their life as well, to start and dig deep and find them. Then, once you do that, getting them to understand the level of which they've used each of these skills. So I've mentioned it in the past with you where we're talking about communication. Communication could mean something different to everyone. Getting them to get a great understanding as to what communication means for them, what teamwork means for them. And then they will start to get a better idea moving forward as to the kind of roles that might suit them.
Absolutely love that. I love your approach of the can do approach, and the world is your oyster kind of like approach. And because I work with people who've had life-changing injuries, as you say, like catastrophic injuries, and all of a sudden, because of an incident that's happened, their whole life is, sort of dramatic drastically changed, um, and they can no longer return back to their job that they had. So it's it and then they're told sort of, um, constantly, oh, because of their injuries, um, you can't do this, you can't do that, and they just sort of, there's, like you said, there's so many barriers, but having, somebody that comes in with hope again, and I come back to hope and sort of, kind of taking down all those kind of barriers and saying, okay, well, what is it? What would be your dream? And starting from there, and then kind of, then exploring that with them as a person. You've really talked about the holistic person-centered approach, which I love. So yeah, like how do you help people understand not just what job they can get, but where they can actually thrive?
Yeah, thrive. That's a big word. I use a 3-point checklist that I think about, and I don't know. I don't know whether I've read this somewhere or whether I came up with it myself. I don't know. I don't know whether this is a well-used model or whatever. But this is something I work to, so I don't even know when it was implanted in my mind or what. But I think of a 3-point checklist, and that is looking at roles that are enjoyable, fulfilling, and sustainable. And that's what we really focus on when we're having conversations. And so if we think about enjoyable, is it something that's going to put a genuine smile on your face? That you are going to, it's probably going to be linked in with a bit of your beliefs and values there, but somewhere, an environment that you're going to, actually like and want to be there. That's key. And if you can achieve that, you're doing quite well. But fulfilling, is that something that is going to offer you challenges and opportunities to learn more and to feel as though you're contributing, so you're getting that fulfillment of actually having a purpose in the job that you're doing, and having a reason for being there. And then the last thing would be sustainable. Now, when we think of sustainable, we often think from a physical or mental health point of view, especially in the environment we work in within vocational rehabilitation. But it goes beyond that for sustainable. It could be financially sustainable. So the salary that you're receiving there, is that enough for you to be able to live on for the longer term? From the working hours perspective, is it kind of regular hours, or is it irregular? Is it shift patterns? Is it something you can sustain? I've done a lot of shift work throughout my life, but now I probably know that shifts are probably going to impact me a little bit more, because I know better about when I do well and when I don't. So I would naturally try to avoid shift work. But it could be also things like the commute to work. Is it, if you've got an hour commute either way each day, is that sustainable in the long term? So we start and look at them kind of things, and then it starts to give a better understanding as to the kind of roles that may well fit into that, by taking that 3-point checklist to every role that's put together. For instance, I know I've got a good mate who's a train driver, and he enjoys the job, really loves the job, and does well out of it. But I know for myself, I wouldn't enjoy just sitting in a cab on my own all day, and I wouldn't enjoy just following them same set of tracks in front of me. In fact, I'm at my worst when I've just got to follow a set of tracks in front of me because I want to go over there, or I want to go over there, or I want to explore what's up there. So just putting them in front of me would be really difficult. So it wouldn't give me that enjoyment or fulfillment that I need. And then if I think
Mm.
about sustainable, for them reasons, it wouldn't be sustainable because I wouldn't be thriving there. I wouldn't feel like I'm adding value in that sense. So it just wouldn't work in the longer term. And these are the examples that you've got to provide people to get an understanding as to what we mean by that 3 point checklist.
I love that. That's so practical. And, you've worked with people facing a wide range of barriers, including health conditions, criminal convictions, veterans, and young people. How do you make sure that your approach stays individual rather than one size fits all?
Because it's still exactly the same behaviors no matter who you're working with. And, we, um, a couple of weeks ago, I was in a workshop with 18 to 25-year-olds who are neurodivergent, typically struggled in mainstream education, who then left education and kind of just been bewildered, wandering around doing nothing. But they've got aspirations, they've got ideas about what they want to do, but just very little idea about how they can achieve it because that
Mm,
support structure isn't there. But we're
mm,
sitting there and we're looking at the same behaviors we're just talking about: proactive job searching skills, transferable skills. What are your qualities? What have you done? What are your aspirations? Goal setting. How are you going to achieve them? What training support is available? What opportunities are out there? So things like apprenticeships, might suit them, or work experience or volunteering could be a pathway. They are exactly the same skills and the same subjects that recently, about a year ago, I was supporting someone on a one-to-one basis who was a consultant for the NHS, a consultant anaesthetist, very highly qualified. He was now in the kind of he was quite far down in his career. He wanted something. He had to go through quite severe career change because of his health, but was still looking for something that hit that 3 point checklist. But he was now in his early 60s and wanted something to just kind of give him that fulfillment. And we were
mm,
talking about exactly the same skills, the same behaviors, the same principles. We were talking about the same things as I was with that group of 18 to 25-year-olds. So it is individualized in terms of looking at the aspirations for that person,
mm,
and the what makes them tick and what the hook is for that individual.
mm.
For him, it was feeling valued. For a young
Love that.
person, it may well be. For someone else starting out their career, it may well be being given an opportunity. What is
Mm.
the hook? What is that there? So you've got to change it slightly for each person, but the subjects and the behaviors, they stay exactly the same.
So would that be when, you've spoken about communication, confidence and strengths, looking different um for different people, how do you help someone identify what they're genuinely good at, especially if they have low confidence? Does that go back to what you were saying around sort of the hook?
Yeah. Yeah, so thinking about specific examples. So for them young people, again, that is a group that really kind of struggles because they'd struggled in mainstream education. So they've had a lot of what being told what they're not good at, what they have, what they can't do, and um, a lot of negativity, and that kind of is the
Mm,
resounding message that you get.
mm,
But sitting down and having a look at even the most basic things, around, oh, so you're good with phones, what can you set up on the phone? Or you make videos. Oh, brilliant. Let's have a look at them videos. What does that involve? Oh, so you've made some videos that go on TikTok. Oh, so you must be quite creative. Oh, so you've been able to adapt that slightly. Or you can pick songs or tunes that go with that. The moment you start doing that and talking about them positive aspects, is really important, because then it goes back to that lad I was talking about in the prison, that perseverance there to find that one little thing, you know,
mm.
that little hook to kind of get the best out of them. Once you've done that, once you've found that, that's when you can start to make positive and lasting change with someone.
Absolutely. And obviously, you do a lot around employability skills, decision making, and interview preparation. From your insights and knowledge and experience, what do you think people most often get wrong about interviews?
Oh, two sides of the fence with this one.
Yeah.
The interviewer, um, they can be a little bit too formal at times, and we've moved forward. If we think of 30 years ago, the idea of interviews would be the film Trainspotting, if you've ever seen that, where there's, he's sat there and there's a panel at the other side of the room of three of them, very straight face, very
Mm.
stern, asking, very direct questions, and it was a one-way street. They've moved on a lot since then. They're a lot more, generally a lot more informal, a lot more casual um, since then. But there is a real need for them to still keep adapting. Um, Putting people at ease, making people relax. I remember my old boss, who I'm still proud to call a mentor now. I remember going for an interview with him, and within 30 seconds of meeting him, I was laughing, and I'd stopped caring, not because I didn't want the job, because I wasn't worried anymore, I wasn't stressed, and that was because of him. And it's a skill.
Yes.
Interviewers,
Yeah.
so making sure interviewers do have the skill to be able to deliver an interview, but also that it's delivered in a way, in an environment that allows people to thrive. I think that's really
Mm,
important. I know we had a
absolutely.
conversation recently about this, about sending the interview questions, and I love that idea, and I've
Yes.
come across
Yeah.
that quite a lot. But I'm going to take things one further back from that. Let's create an environment where people don't have to worry about the interview questions being sent to them
Absolutely.
beforehand, because they are comfortable with going there,
Yeah.
because they're confident in talking about their own skills, their own qualities, and they believe that the people there are going to that they're going to deliver the interview in a manner that is going to allow them to highlight their skills and their qualities.
Absolutely.
That
Yeah.
would be far bigger progress for me than a list of questions going out. That
Mm.
people actually become comfortable and enjoy the process of being interviewed in that sense. So that's from that interview point of view. Then again, for the interviewee, people quite often they focus on what questions I might get asked, and what are they going to ask me? I've got to make sure I've got questions for them. Right, let's read the job description. But again, and this is a longer term strategy, but take that back further and get people to just become more confident in talking about subjects, including themselves, their achievements, their skills, their qualities, their aspirations as well. We've mentioned that word quite a few times, what their own goals are, their own personal goals. Getting them to look inside of a company and think, where can I add value to this company? Where can I add value to that team? Because I want to go along and talk about that, and getting people to do that. So instead of trying to predict the questions and predict answers to them questions, turning up, we're going back to the holistic kind of way that you were talking about earlier. Then,
Mhm.
I've actually going into an interview and going, I'm confident here to tell them what I'm good at and what I'm going to do in this role and what I'm going to bring into this role. Um, that is far better than being able to sit in an interview with your notes. And notes are a great thing to take in for an interview, by the way. I'm a big advocate for taking notes in for an interview, but instead of going, yeah, so communication, yeah, I, I, I want
Yeah.
people to be able to talk more naturally.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And as somebody who was a former HR professional, I've also worked as a recruitment consultant. I've been on the side of an interviewer many times within my HR profession and recruitment and um, in HR worked predominantly as a HR advisor, but like I said, I've had a recruitment consultant sort of career as well, and as a manager as well, kind of been on that side. I've always felt that there just wasn't something right in the process. Whichever side I'm sitting on, the interviewer and the interviewee, just because it doesn't feel authentic, and that I feel that there's a power dynamic there. And like you said, with a sort of a piece of paper and a pen, sort of from the interviewer to the interviewee, there's already that sort of I feel personally like a barrier that's created in terms
Yeah.
of that interaction, because I've personally, the best interviews that I've had have been informal. You're really getting to know that person authentically, and it doesn't feel scripted. You know that you're not, just sort of knowing that, um, you know, that you are being scored with a piece of paper and a pen. It just feels intimidating. So for me, I've never um had the best out of myself in that process. And I would, the ideal for me would be to have the questions beforehand. And I heard this from a conference, at neurodiversity at work conference, but then I was thinking to myself, it shouldn't just be for neurodivergent individuals. It should be the standard for everybody to have, to not have to worry about going into an environment where it feels
Yeah.
intimidating, where it feels like there's a barrier, there's a power dynamic, a power imbalance, that you feel like you're being sort of judged on your performance because there's a scoring system. And that is what it is. When you look back on that sheet and you're scoring the answers compared to other candidates, and I know that there are reasons for that in terms of, you need to look at the fairness, but I would love to see, now that we've got AI, like a system in the future, where we can leverage on AI and actually to sort of do that scoring system, whatever it looks like, but actually using the human interaction and connection to really connect with that person, put them at ease. Yes, send them questions beforehand, ask them beforehand, like, what would you like to see from the interview in terms of how can I get the best out of you in the
Yeah.
interview? What are your needs? Whether you've got a disability or not, or whether you're neurodivergent, or it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I think it's really about the person sitting in front of you. Like, what are their needs? How do you thrive? In an interview, I would, if I had that sort of process, I guarantee you, I would not have been, I would have had more success in terms of getting accepted in some of the jobs that I got rejected for. And that is a lot, you know, uh, a predominant reason for that is because I just didn't feel comfortable
Yeah.
in that environment. It just doesn't feel authentic to me, and it doesn't get the best out of me. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks that. So I really think that, and I'm speaking as someone that has worked in that industry. I think that the processes need to change really. And it can be, look, it can work for some people. Some people would thrive under that structure and process. But what I do think that it needs to be person-centered led. Ask that person, how can I make that process um really effective so it gets the best out of you, and what are your needs? That's it,
Yeah. Yeah. It's simple, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's very simple. And you would see so many people really thriving more in interviews, and and yeah, you can still obviously put some kind of boundaries and structures in place in terms of time frames. But I do think that if you're really having that authentic way, and making it really person centered, you will get a whole lot more than the usual traditional approach,
Yeah.
so it's very interesting, isn't it? Because there's so much that you can say about this, but I think in terms of kind of how do you teach the art of decision making to people who feel lost, overwhelmed, or stuck?
It goes back to the stuff I was talking about with my mum. Have given me the confidence to make my own decisions, but also my dad, in order to go away and get as much information as you can, to make that. And then it comes back to, as daft as it sounds, sitting in there with in that room with a game of Jenga, that decision making you do make. You do have to try each brick. You do have to look around, see which one looks like it's going to be the right one. But the right one might not necessarily be the easiest one all the time, and not be afraid to make mistakes, because you can rebuild. In most cases in life, you're going to be able to rebuild things. And sitting down with people, and my own example of that is, um, and sometimes you have got to share examples when you're delivering employability support. You've got to draw on your own experiences, and sometimes leave yourself quite open and vulnerable when you do this, because that's what works. And if I think I left the prison service because it was time for me to move on, I know that. it was absolutely the right decision to leave when I did. It was absolutely the wrong job that I went into, and I knew that on day one. Modern life, I had fears on day one that wasn't for me, but I'd made that decision, and I had ownership of that decision. But what that did is it was a mistake where I went to, but kind of 9 or 10 months later, I wasn't afraid when the time was ready to move on again, to make that decision because I'd been through that. I'd broken away from them chains, So you do make mistakes, you do go into the wrong things, but in most
Absolutely.
cases they're recoverable. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just that next part of that journey for you. Um,
Mm.
and journeys, decision making, and things like that. And you do this when you go in schools and colleges and deliver workshops, because we're conditioned to think that a career should be kind of a line like that you start off here and you just keep it's a upward trajectory and you just keep progressing. It doesn't,
Mm.
we've heard about mine goes all over the place like that, and I've enjoyed it. I've loved every
Yes.
moment of it, within reason. Um, and don't be afraid to go off the track like that, to go and do something different, just because you've trained as an accountant and you went through university to be an accountant, and that's what your parents wanted you to be, and that's what your job title is, and you tell people when you go to barbecues that that's what you do. Don't be afraid to
Mm.
go and do something different. You've learned skills during that time. You've learned a lot during that job. Don't be afraid to go and apply them to something else. And if you do make a mistake and it's not the right decision, then you know what, you can make decisions again. You can try
Absolutely.
something else. And that really is because so many people get bogged down in one job, one career, because they're afraid to leave there. So giving people the confidence to make that decision and go and try something else.
I love that. And one of the things I really like about your approach is that it feels hopeful and aspirational rather than just taking any job. Why is it so important to you that people think about what they want next rather than just what is available?
Work is too important. And if we go back to, I can't remember when it was written exactly, but within vocational rehabilitation, the name Kim Burton means a huge amount. And
Mm.
he wrote a paper along for a couple of peers, and the outcome of that is work is good for you. And at a conference recently, he was talking and he said, and it was about 25 years ago he wrote that, and he said they've done a recent study and work is still good for you, providing it's the right work. And that is true. Work is an important part of our lives. It's a lot of our time. It's what gives us the money in the bank to pay our bills and go on holidays and things like that. But it's also a lot of our friends as well, our social network, which where we gain and acquire and utilize a lot of skills. So work is really important. So finding the right job to fill that time is huge. So, and I've spoken about that 3 point checklist, I think, which is, I work to, but also it's really important that you enjoy what you do and you believe in what you do. Um, you know,
Absolutely.
these are key things, because I've been in a job that I haven't enjoyed. That job, when I left the prison service, I went into, and I remember not wanting to go to sleep on a night because the next thing that happens, I had to get back up and go back to that same place again. And I'm someone who's in bed during the week, normally for 9 o'clock, and I didn't want to go to sleep because it was the next stage I was entering into. Then the next one after that was go there. So I would rather stay up late, stay awake, than trigger that next phase in that process. And it was
Mm.
horrible. It really was, and it impacts every aspect of your life. So it's really important that we focus on things people want to do and them aspirations, and something that puts a smile on their face, because it impacts your physical health, your mental health, your
Absolutely.
well-being, everything.
I
That's
was
how
just thinking
that's how
about that.
important it is.
It's such a work is such a important outcome of health, if and it that's why it's important for you to choose the right sort of job for you. Your website also highlights supporting people into volunteering, training, education, and paid employment. How important is it to widen the picture of what progress can look like?
It's different for everyone. I always say, volunteering. I'm a big believer that volunteering. It's if we focus on that bit there, is is hugely beneficial for the right people. But there's also some situations, some roles where it's not used in the right manner as well. And I think that's important. I come across a lot of people within kind of things like the creatives industry, or trying to become a physiotherapist or something like that, whereby it's quite easy to find volunteer work to build up their experience, but very difficult to find paid work because there's so many volunteers doing it who are building up the
Mm,
experience. So it's volunteering is great, but it doesn't pay the bills. But when it's used in the right manner, it has such a massive impact on someone. I'm thinking back to a veteran who I supported in my old job, lovely bloke, top bloke, ex-infantry soldier,
mm,
and he'd had a brain injury from working as a tree surgeon. Work was really important for him, and he wanted to go back into something but couldn't go back to working off the ground. So he considered these options and thought, right, I want to go into grounds management, similar skills, but in a more safe environment rather than kind of working up trees. And he wanted to work because he wanted to set a good example to his kids that dad goes out to work, and he wanted that independence because he said, financially, I don't need to worry now. But his own personal action plan was he'd used golf as part of his recovery from a brain injury. And he wrote his CV and wrote a couple of cover letters to start applying to local golf clubs about volunteer positions. He went off, finished the course, went off with his personal action plan to support him. And about 8 or 9 months later, I received an email from him, just completely out of the blue. And he said, "Hi, Stu, hope you're well. Just to let you know, I got 2 different positions with golf clubs. I was doing a day a week at each one, learned a lot, but they both put me on courses as well, and really supported my progress. Just to let you know, I've just been interviewed for a paid position for a grounds manager job at a public school. And he said, and they've offered me the position. I just wanted to thank you for your help." And I was in tears. I was actually in tears. My wife went, "What are you crying about?" When this
mm.
bloke has got a job, you know. And she was like,
Oh,
that's what you were trying to do. But um, but that was how powerful that was as part of his progress on his pathway to getting to where he wanted to be. Um,
I love
and
that.
it kind of
Yes.
really emphasized, for some people, it can be a massive, massive step forward for them.
And when we had a chat before, you'd mentioned around um, somebody who came out of prison and had, sort of a great rehabilitation from, in terms of kind of life skills and,
Yeah.
sort of now thriving coming out of prison. So I wondered if you could touch on that as well, that, to sort of
Yeah.
kind of explain how, um, sort of how people can come out of prison uh, with the rehabilitation that they need to have those life skills in order to reintegrate back to society and thrive in society.
Yeah, he was a high-end gang member. He was, the gang he was part of. He was towards the top of the tree with that. Was quite open about that, and his peers, you could tell through them. And within the prison, he had a lot of clout. He had a lot of status, and was involved not so much in violence himself. He was quite sensible. He was very intelligent, but in organising a lot of it. We always knew he was an organizer. Um, but not that he didn't have his moments as well, but he had great organisational skills like that. But he got out of prison, and it was been quite a while later. I was on the train, and he was there, and he looked well. He was dressed well. He was polite. He was on the phone to someone, and he said, "I'm going to let you go." He said, "I've just seen someone who I know from the past." He came over, shook my hands. We had a good conversation. He'd done a course when he left prison. He was now working full time. He had a little on the way. He'd finished working. He was off to his girlfriend's. And he appeared a completely different person. He'd said about the area that he'd been living in, I don't go to that area now. My parents come to see me where I am rather than me go back there because it spells trouble for me. So I was very kind of self-aware of the impact of that as well. And it was just great to have that conversation with him as two adults on the train. And kind of to see that again, that barrier dropped, and to see the impact, and for him to say thank you and shake my hand, and he went off on his way. I haven't heard from him since. I haven't seen him on the news since, which is a good thing. And I don't know what might have happened. I don't know whether he continued that, but it's really reassuring when someone stands there and goes, you know what, yeah, I'm doing all right, and it puts a smile on your face.
Mm. And in terms of like when I was reflecting when you were speaking, because in occupational therapy, obviously we look at meaningful activities of daily living, and in terms of kind of sort of crimes, we talk about it in the sense of dark occupations, and it sounds as that individual who had great organizational skills that
Yeah,
had used those skills previously for sort of organized crimes, put his skills into sort of non-criminal activities, and actually it just shows you that somebody who comes out of prison can engage in meaningful occupations, and they don't have to go back to those dark occupations. They can actually engage
yeah,
in meaningful occupations and reintegrate themselves back into society without reoffending. And actually, I wrote a dissertation about life skills and rehabilitation of of prisoners um, when I did my occupational therapy masters, and I just found it kind of fascinating about that how when people use their skills into life skills into reintegrating themselves and rehabilitating themselves back into society, that reoffending rates drastically can reduce down.
yeah,
So it's really amazing what people can do, and I just again it goes back to hope, and them being given the hope that they can sort of participate in meaningful occupations, and you know be able to get some form of employment or vocation without having to participate in criminal activity. So yeah, no, thank you so much for your insight for that. And you were recognized as Vocational Rehabilitation Practitioner of the Year 2 years ago, where I first met you. And like I said, you accepted that award so gracefully, and you were so humble. And um, I just wanted to ask you, what did that recognition mean to you, and what do you think it reflected about the work you're doing?
yeah. Thanks. It was bizarre because I couldn't believe I was nominated, and when I turned up on the day, naturally you hear the good things about other people, and you almost pick your own winner in your head. And I wasn't expecting it. I was stunned when it happened. But for me, it was I I loved the fact that employability was given recognition. I got into employability about 10 years ago and realized quite early on I loved it, as I mentioned earlier. And I often think it lags behind in terms of recognition around careers. So if I go into schools and colleges, there's a lot of emphasis there on careers guidance and people, understand career options and choices and things like that. But not enough attention paid on employability skills, like we're talking about, getting people to become more comfortable and identifying their skills and their qualities and their aspirations, all this kind of stuff. And I often think it doesn't get the respect it deserves. And then even within vocational rehabilitation, it's it's there was nothing else in terms of dedicated employability support within that arena, and it's quite often a bought on job as part of someone else's role. Right, I've supported this person to get up to this stage, and now ready to go back to work. They'll send me a copy of their CV. I'll have a quick check of it, send them some good places to look for jobs, and that's always been the case. And when I was brought in to vocational rehabilitation by two amazing ladies, Sharon Patmore and Helen Valls Russell, they kind of recognize that employability is really important. And it kind of validated that for me when I went that, dedicated employability support for someone, of someone spending that time was being given that recognition. So for me, it was I spend a lot of my time campaigning and trying to promote how important employability is. So for it to be recognised like that for me was a huge win and a step forward for that subject.
Yeah, congratulations and very well deserved.
Yeah,
And I can honestly say myself, since I've known you, you've always been so supportive of me and my own career. So you're genuinely and authentically a very nice person. Not only
thank you.
great at what you do professionally, but just genuinely, authentically. uh, lovely, lovely, kind guy. Um, so I just want to talk about how you function yourself, in terms of routine, well-being, burnout, and balance. So, a big part of Function First Care podcast is about how professionals function themselves. So I'd love to ask, what does your day-to-day routine look like, and what helps you to function well?
It's something I've become more aware of as I've got is older the best way to put it, or more mature. As I've become more mature, I've started to understand more about all of this. And there's a well-known saying of early to bed, early to rise makes you healthy, wealthy, and wise. And I joke and say I'm not healthy, wealthy, or wise, so it's not foolproof. But I'm working on it. But it there's within that there's a bit of seriousness for me personally because I'm quite big on things like sleep hygiene. So during the week, I have a regular kind of sleeping pattern. Um, I get to bed at a good time. I don't watch much TV anyway, but I avoid TV kind of late on. So I'm not kind of got stimulation things going on there. I enjoy reading. I do a lot of walking. I've been more conscious over the years as to my diet and what I'm eating and things like that. So uh, all of that contributes to helping me. I wake up early. I'm energetic. Um, I manage my time a lot more effectively now. My not just my working time, but my downtime, my switch off time. Only responding to things outside of my working hours if absolutely necessary. Only doing work outside of my working time if absolutely necessary, and then also balancing, making sure I give myself that time back as well. So I've done a lot of that as well as things, like walk and spending quality time with family. I'm making time count a lot more, as well as also sometimes doing nothing, which sometimes we find, and me certainly, because I've always been scared of boredom, but just spend a bit of time doing nothing, and being alone with my thoughts, because then boredom allows me to be creative and think ideas as well, which I absolutely love that time now.
Mm, yeah, no, there's a book I know that's called The Art of Doing Nothing, and it's a beautiful book, and my partner actually went on he regularly goes each year to a silent retreat, 10-day silent
Yeah,
retreat, and in there you can't exercise, you're not allowed to journal until the end, you're not allowed to have any technology, you're just eating plant-based food, meditating, waking up early, and sort of doing your meditation, sort of walking on the grounds mindfully, and you're completely sort of stripped off of any kind of the normal societal
yeah,
stimulus, external stimulus that you have, so like I said, there's yeah, you don't have your phone, TV, computer, like I said, you're not allowed to even journal, like you're just there, just literally just there with your own mind for 10 days. And he absolutely loves it, and he comes back so energized afterwards. Unfortunately, this year he wasn't able to go because we both became self-employed, and had responsibilities that goes along with
yeah,
that. But he, I know that he, he can his energy changes completely in terms of being completely re-energized and regulated, and it just shows you how much sort of sensory overload we have on a day to day, and information that our brain has to process, and just kind of um living in a world that's so fast paced, and actually the art of doing nothing is really important for our nervous
yeah,
system. So I would encourage it, even if it's not as extreme as a silent retreat, trying to create some form of rest is so productive to the nervous system, and actually sort of being with your mind, whether it's in nature or in your own environment, or wherever it is, just sitting with yourself, pausing,
yeah,
having just a moment, even if it's just 5 minutes each day to ourselves, amongst the busy periods of lives where we're just constantly doing, doing, doing. So important. So I love that you have that. And you've also described yourself as a real morning person. And can I just say that I'm so, so like envious of that, that you can wake up at 5 a.m. And I've tried to be, to do early mornings like that, just in terms of waking up, but my body just fights back and he just wants to stay in bed for a bit longer. Um, so yeah, talk about, what do early mornings give you? And, talk about that in terms of you being such a morning person and bring some of that energy towards me. I need it.
I get up 5 during the week. I'm up at 5 every morning. My wife, I get up at 5. She gets up at 5 past 5, and then the first thing she often does is shouts at me because I'm singing. So that's one of the first things. We have a bit of breakfast. So I'm normally having breakfast at about 20 past 5 in the morning, and then we take the dog for a walk or a run, depending on what day it is. I give him kind of a bit of energy, and then we both start work typically at about 7 o'clock. And by then, I'm ready for work. I'm full of energy. I've got I've got my list of things I want to get done for that day. Um, and by kind of mid-morning, I know I'm starting to get ready for my lunch kind of time, quite early. But I also know that I am a morning person. That's when my energy is at its best. That's when I function at my best. And later on, I'm not so good. So I avoid anything that would be work related, typically a lot on the evening. Not always avoidable, that's life, but I try my best to do that. Um, and then what happens on a Saturday morning? I still wake up at 5 o'clock naturally. I get up at 5 o'clock. My wife doesn't get up at 5 past 5 that morning. She turns over and goes back to sleep. The dog has a lie and he goes back to sleep, and I go out for a walk, no matter what the weather. Typically for about 2.5, 3 hours on a Saturday morning, just myself, just out walking for a good long time. No music in my ears, nothing, just thinking, walking, and I love it. This week when I went, quite bizarrely in the area I live, because it's I'm not far from rural, but it's certainly not rural. Just walking around the streets I was in was a peahen, so a peacock, a peahen, just walking around the streets in the estate I live in. I was like, peahen. So I took some photographs of it. But just bizarre at 20 past 5 on a Saturday morning, to see this thing walking in people's gardens in the middle of a housing estate, But that's me. That's what I do. I get up and about, and make use of that time.
I love it. And I bet you have so much more sort of time when when most of the world is quiet, where outside and your inbox as well, I'm sure. Um, in terms of having to just have like to I guess increase that productivity and be your most optimal because, you know, um when you hit Monday morning, 9 a.m., it's go, go, go. But you've already had like, a lot of hours before 9 a.m. to
Yeah.
sort of, kind of walk your dog. And do you need an alarm now to kind of, or does your body clock automatically know to
I
wake up at 5
use an
a.m.?
alarm, but typically I'm waking up by then, and I sleep really well. By the way, I typically have about 7.5 to 8 hours sleep per night.
Yeah, which
I'm
is
I'm
so
very
important.
fortunate. I'm very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's good quality sleep as well.
that's really
I'm
good.
not
And
particularly restless. I work hard for that to be able to, in terms of my discipline with that. But I'm very lucky with that. And then
yes.
I wake up at about 5 o'clock. The alarm goes off, but I'm already waking up by then, and I'm ready to go. I'm ready to hit the day. Because I'm rested. I have. I'm ready to kind of to get on with the things I need to do for that day.
And does your dog wake up automatically at 5 a.m. as well, or
Nah,
no?
I get up at 5. My wife gets up at 5 past 5.
5
He gets up at about 4:45 when he knows we'll be getting ready to take him out. He just starts stretching and shaking his head as if like I'm ready now. So
Yeah.
he's not
It's,
naturally an early
he likes a
riser.
lie-in.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of lay-ins where you sort of sleep beyond 5 a.m. or not?
I The most recent one would be 7 o'clock, and that was when I did the Three Peaks Challenge. Other than that, over the past anywhere between 5 and 10 years, I can't remember waking up any later than 7 o'clock in the morning.
Really? Wow. And your role, what role does walking, movement, and being outdoors play in your well-being? It sounds like you do a lot of that.
Yeah, I do. Over the past few years, I've increased my walking steps up to an average of at least 20,000 a day. Recently, because I
Wow.
did a challenge, I got it up to 21, then up to 22,500 a day for this year. I love walking. I do a lot of walking, whether that is out walking specifically or even just walking around the garden, watering the plants, things like that. They all add up to my steps, and I love that. That's a big part of my mental well-being.
Yeah.
If I'm stressed about things in life, if I'm bored,
Yeah.
if things are going on top, I would just go for a walk. And it really does kind of help me massively. I'm fortunate my wife enjoys walking, but not as much as what I do. So she comes for some
Mm.
of them, but also so she leaves me alone for some of them as well. And it strikes a nice balance. But that is hugely, but also not just in terms of things in life, but also work as well. Um, my ideas, my creativity, it comes from being bored when I'm out walking, not having anything in my ears, but just being able to think about what could we do, what are the priorities, what would be a good idea for a project. I do all of that while I'm out and about. So it all buys into it.
Love that. And speaking of walking, you recently completed the Three Peaks Challenge. Congratulations on that. And you've
Thank
spoken
you.
about how hard, about rewarding that was. What did your experience teach you about challenge, discipline, and how you want to live?
I keep joking it was my third and final one. I first did it about 14 years ago, I think. Then the last one before that was about 8 or 9 years ago, and then this one. It's taught me a lot. The first two times I'd done it, I'd done a lot of walking leading up to it, but not really enough, and I hadn't changed any of my lifestyle. I just carried on, just thinking walking itself was going to be enough, and it wasn't. So I'd completed it them two times, but really kind of struggled. Now I found it difficult still because you're going to because it's a challenge. But I'd changed a lot around my own lifestyle for 18 months leading up to it. I had a very specific, very clear plan as to how I was going to achieve it. And I stuck to that rigidly. And it was more about not just getting out and walking and getting the steps in, but changing other aspects of my life and my mindset as well, which I found, hugely important. And then what I found is when I was doing the challenge itself, um, I know I joke, and I know I'm still, relatively young man, but I was out walking over that course that weekend. There's a lot of other people there doing the challenge themselves, either as part of groups or as smaller individual, like families and stuff. And you get chatting with them, and it appeared to me that I was one of the older people doing it as a challenge, and that really stood out. That I was able to still have that same energy to be able to do it and fit enough to be able to do it, but also the discipline. But also, I quite a few times I came across people who were about half my age, and I was keeping up with them, or even sometimes kind of overtaking them. And that I was, yes, it had been hard work, but that was a result of that 18 months of build up
Mm,
to that. That I'm not a small bloke. I'm a big stocky bloke. I know I am.
mm, mm,
But by taking that time and all that preparation meant that I struggled, but no more than anyone else over that
mm.
weekend, which was in contrast to the last times I'd done it. So really important.
And you also mentioned when we had a chat that you stopped drinking for a long stretch, and you said that it made you realize that you didn't need alcohol to sort of tick a box. What did that shift teach you about sort of habits, social norms, and your own well-being?
Yeah, I was fearful of it, to be honest. I went nearly 9 months without a drop of alcohol, and I would say for the past, I don't know, 15 years, I've only just been someone who doesn't drink during the week. Would be just a celebratory for you on a Friday for finishing work, have them at home, and then the same for Saturday night because I saw it was my reward for working is having a couple of beers. So to remove that was quite scary, but the prospect of it was a lot worse than the reality. I actually found out I didn't miss it at all during that 9 months, not even for a single moment. And that was even over Christmas time. I found I was actually enjoying doing something different. And then I certainly enjoyed how I felt when it came to doing the challenge. I felt ready for it. Physically and mentally, I felt ready for it because I'd gone through all that process and my mindset was completely different to the first two times when I hit it. I was excited to hit that first mountain and get going because I knew I'd done everything I possibly could. If I remember the first time I did the challenge, I'd had a good drink on the Friday night with the lads, or some of the lads I was doing the challenge with, and I was a little bit hungover. Now you think of that, it's a big enough challenge as it is 24 hours of absolute pain. and I'd started it with a bit of a hangover from the night before, whereas this time I was ready. I was hitting it, and I love that. I was proud of myself for doing that.
Love that. And what has changed in how you think about alcohol now, your energy and feeling good physically and mentally?
Yeah, one of the things I would say is I got to the stage a little bit in life, um, where if I was, because I just have a couple of drinks at home on the weekend, if I was going out to the pub with friends or something like that, I would be a little bit anxious leading up to going out for a night out. And I'd start getting a bit nervous and a bit excited, not because of the night itself, but because I know I've always had a good tolerance to be able to drink quite a lot on the evening. But then for the following days, I would realize I'm going to be lethargic, I'm going to be not feeling at my best, and going to be a bit, oh, wish I hadn't bothered last night, and kind of, in low in mood as a result of it. And that was a constant if I was going out and having a few beers. Um, and I would almost be nervous and anxious leading up to it because of that reason. Now, if I think about hitting the Three Peaks Challenge with 9 months of having nothing, I had what was building up inside of me was nervous excitement. Rather than anxiousness. I was nervous a bit, but I was excited. I couldn't wait to get going, and I
Mm,
couldn't settle. And I remember being at the foot of Ben Nevis before it all starts, and you're counting down. This is what time we're setting off, and it's in 24 hours is about to start. That is going to be horrible. It's going to be great, but it's going to be horrible because you're pushing yourself physically and mentally. But all I was thinking to myself is, once this is done, I know the buzz I'm going to feel afterwards. I know how
mm,
good I'm going to feel. I'm going to have weeks of feeling like that, like proud of myself. I'm going to have weeks of feeling energized. Yes, I'm going to be in a bit of pain. I'm going to be a bit sore, but I'm going to be walking proud of my chest out and kind of recognizing what I've just managed to complete. And that was in contrast to that feeling of going out for beers. And it made me recently, when I've sat and reflected, that go, actually, what do I really enjoy? Do I enjoy that culture of going out and having sessions all the time with my mates, or do I enjoy of going out and pushing myself to what I can achieve? I know what I prefer out of that, and it's shaped how I'm thinking about things moving forward and decisions I'm making around how I spend my time and what I do massively. And again, it's made me kind of better understand what it is I want out of my own life as well.
You mentioned that if you know a night out is coming, that there can be anxiety before it because you know how you might feel after. How much do you think people ignore the impact of those choices on everyday function?
I think you just get into a routine.
Mm,
If, and how important that is. If I look at the way I was, would be I finish work on a Friday. I've got the best, most understanding wife in the world, by the way, who is just an amazing person. But I would have my tea. The dog would have had his walk, so I'm ticking the boxes. And then she works hard, and she'd have gone up and had a bath, and I'd do the washing up. I've done the washing up, and it strikes that time. Right, I can have my beer now. It's my reward throughout the week, and I would do that. Then a Saturday morning, I would get up, 5 o'clock and go for a long walk, feeling a bit groggy from the night before. I'd have only had about five, six or something like that, but I'd be feeling a bit groggy. Then Saturday, be the same thing. On the evening, I'll go through that process again.
mm,
Right, I can have my beer now. Um, and it just becomes a routine. And when I looked at my stats and everything, actually, once I'd stopped drinking, my performance afterwards on the Saturday morning was unrecognizable. My resting heart rate, as a result of the changes that I've made, have reduced by about 3 to 4 beats per minute. I dropped from 62 beats per minute. Sorry, five. It's gone down to about 57, 58 beats per minute. My resting heart rate as a result of them changes. So it's
wow.
made me start to understand actually that tick in the box, that going through the process. I was sat having a beer even if I didn't fancy one because it's a Friday or Saturday night. Actually making that decision to, you know what, moving forward, have one if you want one. Have one
Mm,
because that's what you want to do at that moment in time, not because it's ticking a box, not because it's part of a process, not because you
mm,
feel like you've got to because of who you're with. Have one
mm,
because you want one. Going back to that decision making that we've been talking about quite a lot. And it's made me understand that a lot better. And when we're talking about people when they're going for physical recovery or even mental recovery, you know, actually making them decisions, you know, it does have an impact on your health. So use it
Mm,
sparingly. You know,
love
have it
that.
when you want, run rather than just for the sake of it.
That's such wise words. Thank you, Stu. And you've spoken about how supportive your wife is, and I know you've been married for 28 years. Is
We've
that
been
right?
together for 28 years and we've been
Oh,
married
that's right.
for 19 years. It's our 24th anniversary
Right.
next year.
What, 20?
28 years together, 19 years married. It's our 20th wedding anniversary next year.
20th wedding anniversary next year, yeah.
Yeah.
And wow, that are you doing anything nice to celebrate that special milestone?
We are we're a little bit different. We're a bit after at times. We do things a little bit I don't know that not everyone would fully understand, I think, at times, which I like. I love that. I love not being kind of typical what everyone else would do. And she wants a nice meal out, which is great. We'll do that. But she wants to do something that we've done for one of our other anniversaries in the past, and that's do a litter pick on a beach. And it
Oh,
sounds
that's so
bizarre, right? But we
nice.
did it a few
That's
years ago. We did it a few years ago on our
wow.
anniversary. It didn't plan like that. We went to the beach and then there was the kid there. So we ended up doing a litter pick.
Yeah,
And we ended up doing 3 beaches in the same day. And she absolutely loved it. And she loves that kind of thing. And she loves being on the
love
beach.
that.
So she said, oh,
Yeah,
for our anniversary, should we go to the beach and do a litter pick? So it's like, yeah, okay. So while other people might go to Vegas or something like that, or
yes.
I don't know, might go on a cruise, we'll probably be walking around with a litter picker and a rubbish bag, picking up bits of rubbish
Oh.
off a beach.
And helping the environment. That's amazing. And in
Yeah.
terms of kind of walking with your dog and with your wife and having shared experiences that obviously matter to you a lot. What role do relationships and simple pleasures, like you've mentioned, how you're going to celebrate your milestone anniversary? What do simple pleasures play within relationships in helping you stay balanced?
Uh, yeah, massively. My dog, who's with me most days when I work from home, I've told him things I wouldn't tell anyone. And he listens, he's a good listener, not so good at talking back and giving advice, but he does listen. But also, spending that time. We go for a lot of walks or we spend time in the garden away from distractions and we have very open and honest conversations,
Mm,
about things. If things are going well, if things are not going well, which is really important. But my wife is hugely supportive. When I was in the job, as I mentioned, where I didn't want to go to sleep because I would be going back there, I sat
mm,
bolt upright in bed one night and said, I'm going to hand my notice in. And she
mm,
just looked at me and she went, okay, and turned over and went to sleep. And I was waiting for her to talk me out of it. And
yeah.
she said, okay. She couldn't care less what I say as long as it's what I want to do.
Mm,
Um, and it was like, oh, I've got to do this now then. But having that person there who will support me no matter what, is massive. And we have a lot of fun together. We do things that other people perhaps, as I say, wouldn't. We get simple pleasure out of stuff like that. We probably get a bit of criticism sometimes because that's,
mm.
sometimes how we live our lives a bit. But I
Oh.
wouldn't swap it. And it's a big part of my physical and my mental well-being, and hopefully for hers as well.
Love that. What is the secret then to a long, sort of long, successful relationship for our listeners?
Oh, I don't know. Certainly not thinking you've got all the answers. I know that. Because you're still learning all the time. You're still taking each day as it comes. It is a long time, but thinking for one moment that you've made it because you've been together for 28 years, it wouldn't work. Keep working at things, keep trying new things, trying surprises. Um, we've just recently had a holiday, and the biggest fear for my wife was boredom has always been my worst enemy. And I can be
Mm,
horrible if I'm bored, and I know I can. But we went for 2 weeks with our dog to Spain, and sometimes if she suggests something, instead of going, nah, I don't fancy that, just going, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And seeing the smile that comes on her face as a result of it, and doing things like that and doing daft things, little things that I can really make a difference. And just
mm.
keep things fresh and exciting still.
Love that. Thank you. And you spoke about sort of work spaces that haven't been conducive for you. So speaking of that, burnout seems to be an important part of your story, especially in the prison service. What was happening for you at that point, and how did you know something needed to change?
Yeah, as I was approaching my last few years in the prison service, we've mentioned quite a lot. I'm a very positive person, very energetic. I people always see me as a calm person as well. It's bizarrely excitably calm because I stay calm under pressure, but I bring a lot of energy to the room, and I know that. But also, it's not always what you get, and what you see isn't always what you're getting. And a big part of it is I had something called lich and planus. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I certainly hadn't up until that point, and there's no known cause with it. And what it is, it's a skin thing, and it's rashes all over your skin. And I've had it twice in my life now. And there's no known causes, but it's typically males and typically in their 30s and 40s. And it's normally, they believe, as a result of inability to deal with stress. Now, no matter what's going on around me, things could be getting bombed, and I will still smile and the positive energy, but I'm still going through the same thing as everyone else. Whereas they will perhaps kind of show their emotions and release all of that. I don't. And it was explained to me by the consultant that the pressure valve just doesn't exist there. I just keep going and stay resilient and stay positive and keep driving everyone else forward, but I'm never releasing that pressure. So it comes out
Wow.
of my skin. And
Wow.
I get quite, I haven't, thankfully now, touch wood, I haven't had it since I left the prison service, I don't think. But I had it twice, and it lasts for a long time, and it affects literally your whole body, and it's a rash. And then once you've got it, it starts becoming more inflamed as you get stressed. And
Wow.
I had to go through different um, um, kind of treatments for it, in terms of they tried different medication, which wasn't working. Then I had
Mhm.
to have UV light treatment. I had to go to a sunbed and stand there in the sunbed.
Wow.
And then they
Yeah.
burnt me by accident by leaving me in there for too long. I was too cooked. So then I had to have treatment for burns as a result of it. But it all boils down to that inability to deal with stress when it happened.
Wow.
And
Mm.
it took me a long time to kind of understand that.
Mm. Mm.
So it comes out for me in my skin. Thankfully, I moved away from, I'd realized after a lot of years and enjoying the prison service and, a job that I gained so much from, actually, it's time to move on from there. And
Mm.
doing so, even though it was the wrong place I went to at that time, had such an impact on my physical and mental well-being, because it wasn't just
Wow.
mental, it was physical, because, suddenly my skin kind of returned back to normal. Mentally, I'm feeling kind of far happier place, more relaxed, sleeping better, everything like that. So yeah, it took a while for me to start to understand the impact that being in a work environment I wasn't enjoying anymore can have on me physically and mentally.
Wow. And in a very testosterone filled, high stress environments, what helped you cope, and what do you think those environments often get wrong about well-being and support?
Yeah, and it was very testosterone filled, and you kind of peacock, you know, um, and you're dealing with high stress situations day in day out. It could be all day, and people kind of, I don't think there's that, certainly things have moved on within that environment a lot more in terms of understanding the support around mental well-being, but probably still not there yet. Things like reflective practice is really important. Mindfulness, I remember going on a mindfulness course and finding that really beneficial, but also understanding things like cumulative adversity, that things
Mm.
are going to keep building up. And it
Mm.
could be that someone goes off work after dealing with one small incident,
Mm.
and people not really understanding, well, what do you mean that? How come they're off work because of that? It isn't. It's everything else that's built up throughout that life, that
Mm.
person's life, and this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's that kind of the drip that takes the bath water over, and everything starts to overflow. that is really important to get that better understanding of that within them environments. It comes from the management within them environments, but also the staff themselves, to be able
Mm,
to identify that and to talk openly and honestly
mm,
about how they're feeling and where
mm,
they are with things, and kind of and leave themselves at times a little bit vulnerable
mm.
amongst their peers.
And looking back now, I know you had this physiological sort of reaction in terms of a rash. Did you feel that you suppressed those emotions when you were stressed and kept that smile and that positivity going, sort of masking perhaps? Do you feel that that's fair to say? Perhaps like
Yeah,
when you were um when perhaps when actually what might have been helpful for you at the time is perhaps just kind of like uh release that sort of stress response and whatever that looked like. But do you, on reflection now, sort of what do you think was going on there, and what do you think would have been more conducive, and might not have sort of um brought on that physiological sort of kind of reaction that you had?
yeah. I think, I mean, at the time, I probably didn't have that emotional regulation so much, like I have now. I've had to learn that. Um, Dealing with things a lot differently. So if I think about now how I look after myself as a person, I do things that are far better for me, as in I do a lot of my walking. I've always walked a lot, but not as much as I do now. Allowing myself that free time without having earphones in, suppressing everything all the time.
Mm,
Reading, spending quality time with people, being
mm,
honest about my emotions, being honest about how I feel about things, not
yeah.
being afraid to say to someone, I just need a little bit of time out, or I'm going to take a break, or actually things are getting on top of me at the moment.
Mm,
Um, at the time, I probably didn't do a lot of that. Well, I know for a fact I didn't do all of that. You just keep on going. You just keep moving forward, no matter
mm,
what. And it comes from that, as in that attitude of, testosterone filled environments, as we've mentioned, but also we think about resilience as someone who just keeps going. It isn't.
mm.
Resilience is also about that ability to step away from things just for a moment and have a break,
Absolutely. And put
to look
healthy
after yourself.
boundaries in place.
Yeah, and
Yes,
that for
absolutely.
me is a key part of it. I'm far better now to be able to understand that. I'm far I'm far more open to doing something new and putting a smile on my face than perhaps I
Hmm.
was, and relaxing,
Yes. Yeah.
and making the most out of things, and doing things that I would enjoy, which all buys into that.
So, you've worked in very intense roles, but you bring so much, energy and positivity. How do you protect yourself from giving too much away?
Yeah, again, I've got to calm myself down a little bit at times. I know for a fact I do. Um, and I've got one, at times it's like a jack in the box. Um, I know it doesn't always work for people. Sometimes people want someone a bit calm, and I've had to learn how to calm that down a little bit as well. But also, I like to share information, and I've found that really beneficial over time, in terms of giving things away and stuff. I like to share stuff across LinkedIn and things like that, and other social media platforms, self-help things that will help people. And sometimes I've got to be a little bit careful there to go, you know what, if I'm spending all my time sharing stuff, um, you know, I'm not necessarily doing stuff that also brings some money in. I've had to become a little bit more business savvy in that sense. So it's great to share resources and ideas and things like that, and I will do that, and I will keep doing that. But
Mm,
also, that it doesn't become that is your job, and the paid stuff, the stuff that your business comes from, gets forgotten about. So I've had to strike that balance as well, over time. And I've done
mm,
that by looking at other people and how do they do it, and learning from them. And to be able to get that regulation just right, because otherwise you can burn yourself out. You can burn yourself out by
absolutely.
constantly sharing free resources and putting videos out and content out
Mm,
and stuff like that and things, and you become obsessed with doing it. And then you
mm,
go, I'm burning myself out doing this, but I haven't got the
mhm.
energy to do the stuff that I get paid the money to do.
It's
So,
very true.
and you've got to do all of this because before you can become known as that person who, is constantly sharing stuff and is full of energy and ideas and stuff. But behind the scenes, that person is bent out and no longer earning a wage because they haven't got the energy to do what they need to do. So you
Absolutely,
do
yeah.
have to you have to get that balance just right.
Yeah. And one thing that stands out in your story is the difference between being naturally good, in front of a room, like we said before, and still feeling nervous in more informal or less structured sort of spaces. What has that taught you about your vulnerability and confidence?
Yeah, I've had to become more honest. And again, this goes back to what we are talking about there with regards to the burnout. I've had to be
Yes.
more comfortable talking about my vulnerability.
Hmm.
I put me in front of 1,000 people on a stage with a subject to talk about, and I'm not going to get nervous. I'm going to get excited. I'm going
Yeah.
to love it. Put me at the bottom of a mountain and tell me I've got to walk up there and come back down and go and do another two more. I'm not going to get nervous. I'm going to get excited again.
Yes.
I've got a lot to face.
Yeah.
But stick me in front of one person, and I've
Mm,
got to introduce myself and my business and how that
mm,
business can potentially help them. I I get nervous about that and I get
mm.
anxious about it. But I've got to be open and honest. And then what that does is it shows people this is a real human being and they
Absolutely, yeah.
face absolutely normal challenges. They face the same challenges that other people do, but also it's a small environment that we work within where people quite often they all know each other. I'm hoping as well that what that does is they will understand that actually it's quite a lot for me to have that conversation, in
Mm,
front of them, and perhaps they'll go a little bit easier on me. I don't know, but perhaps they'll kind of keep the subject on to something that I might be comfortable with, and they will have an
mm.
understanding that that is hard work for me.
Absolutely.
So that exposing the vulnerability can help with that.
Absolutely. And I think, being embracing vulnerability, as Brené Brown says, is just so important because I think it really creates that connection, relatability to people. And this is, what this podcast is all about, sort of being able to have a safe space to express one's vulnerabilities, especially when we don't really hear so much with professionals expressing their vulnerabilities, as an individual. Um, so, we're at it's the World Cup football these days, and I think we're 2 weeks from it being finished. Is that right? I
Yeah.
know you also love football and big events, but you've clearly become more thoughtful about what genuinely gives you energy versus, what just feels like something you should do. How do you work that out for yourself? And what football team do you support?
Um, I'm a Hartlepool United fan. I travel all over the country watching them. Not as many games as I used to at one point, but I still get to quite a few games per season. And that also involves helping to run a football supporters group as well. And my everything's changed over the years with that, as well, because actually I've started to get a better understanding around what is important even when I go into football. For one time for me, going to football would mean, being on the train early with beers on the train, getting to a pub, meet up with my mates, and loads of us be together. And we've had some great times. But there's a couple of blokes who I take to a lot of games when I go to now, and they're both quite a lot older than me. They're both in their 70s with their own health issues. And what I do now is I drive to the games because they don't drive, and I take them two with me, them to have a couple of beers. But it's more important for me now that them two can still get to games and they don't have to worry about trains and the underground and getting to and from stations. That all they've got to worry about is we get to a pub, they go in there, they can have a pint, they can have a bite to eat, we go and watch the game, and they get home safely. That for me, so even my hobbies have started to change over the years. That for me is more important now than having 10 pints before the game, like it would have once been. And actually, I'm enjoying going to football a lot more as a result of that. Not always with the result, it doesn't impact that as such, but I'm getting quality time with two people who I value really highly, but really importantly,
Absolutely.
that they are allowed, they can now still get to the football, despite the challenges that they've got because
Mm,
of that sacrifice.
love that. Yeah, that's absolutely great. And who do you think's going to win for the final
It's
and the
come with
World
home.
Cup?
It's coming home.
It's coming home. I hope
Yeah,
it is.
it's yes, yeah, it's
And
coming home.
so for someone listening who is at a crossroads, maybe burnt out, maybe lacking confidence, maybe unsure what they're good at, what would you most want them to hear?
Yeah, I mean we spoke about quite a lot, but don't be afraid to make a change, to make a decision. You know, that's really important. Not being afraid to do that. If you make a mistake, you know, you can rebuild and start again. It's not plenty of people have done that over the years. So please don't be afraid of that. But looking at them two things I mentioned at once already, you know, enjoy what you do and believe in what you do. And if you can sit them two at the core of everything, you won't go far wrong. You know, because
Mm,
if you're enjoying it, then you're getting that satisfaction there. And if you're believing in it, then it's probably going to link with your values and your personality. Um, and you're more likely to keep wanting to do it. So yeah, don't be afraid to change and enjoy what you do and believe in what you do. Really important messages there.
love that. And what does a finally around, I know you talked a lot about self-care beyond the buzzword of it, which is a fantastic. What does a good, meaningful, and balanced life look like to you now, in summary?
Yeah, getting that fulfillment. I buzz over what I'm doing, and getting that enjoyment, but also striking a balance. You know, I think it was 2 weeks ago, it would have been, or a week and a half ago. Um, I didn't have any sessions booked in on a Thursday afternoon. My wife finishes work early on a Thursday. It was a beautiful day. Um, and she came home and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "Oh, I'm going to go for a walk." Actually, walking figures quite highly in a lot of what I do anyway. But I was still working. But and I said, "Okay." I said, I'll come with you." She went, "You sure you don't have to?" I said, "No, I will." She went, "I thought you had work to do still." I went, "Yeah, yeah, but there's nothing I've got planned that I can't do tomorrow." And she went, "Okay." So we just sacked work off. I sacked it off on the Thursday afternoon, just went for a walk. And it was brilliant. It was roasting hot. We had a brilliant time. But understanding actually you do need to get that balance right. You do need to, you know,
Absolutely.
it's not just all work, work, work. Work is important, but there's other things that are
Yeah,
important as well. Spending quality time together, doing things you enjoy, doing things that will kind of put a smile on your face, you know,
absolutely.
really important.
And we heard it, from an employee specialist. It's not all about work. Find that balance of, that
Yeah.
work-life balance. Um, and um, And finally, if you could leave listeners with one message about confidence, work, identity, and finding your own way forward, what would it be? I know you gave some like pearls of wisdom a moment ago, but if you could just leave listeners with one message about confidence, work, identity, and finding your own way forward, what would it be?
Your personality sits at the key of everything. Get your personality into your documents, match what you're going to do with your personality, you know, the kind of things that you're going back to enjoyment and believing in what you do. You know, when you're going for an interview, you know, take your personality with you. You know, that's your key strength. Rather than going in and reading from a script, take that personality in. Your personality is key to all of this, you know, so spend a bit of time, get to understand your personality and get to understand how you can display it to other people.
Love that, Stu. And you know what? I can completely relate to that because, like I said, when I've performed the best in interviews is when I've shown up as my authentic self, showing my personality. Um, when I haven't thrived in interviews is when I've felt like I needed like a script to have that scoring system as high as
Mhm.
possible. And what you end up doing there is actually you end up creating answers that you think the interviewer wants to hear, but
Yeah.
actually you're not coming across, you're not actually showing up as your authentic self. And so I've had to learn that through my own experience to actually show up as I am and
Yeah.
and just let my personality shine and and that might not be for everybody. Like I always say to people that an interview process, a probation period, an employer employee relationship, whether you're self-employed or employed, is always a two-way uh, it's both parties that need to make that decision as to whether they're the right fit or not. It shouldn't just be the employer deciding whether the employee or self-employed individual is right for them. It should always be that both parties decide whether they're a right fit for each other,
Yeah,
you know?
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on Function First Care podcast. You've been absolutely incredible. We'd love to kind of, have you back here again at some point. If our listeners have got any sort of comments, anything they want to sort of mention, then they can pop the comments in the inbox, and then we'll leave your details for sure so that people can sort of reach out to you, whether that's employers or individuals, or whoever wants to get in touch with you, then they'll have your details because we'll pop them up there. But yeah, thank you so much for your time, Stu. It's been absolutely brilliant, and yeah, have loved having you. Take
fantastic. I
care.
love being
Yeah.
here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stu. Bye bye.
Bye.